Do you remember 22? I try not to. What a fuck up I was. This episode of The In-Between is intended for mature audiences and includes topics such as emotional, sexual, and physical violence. Testimony shared by guests of the show is their own and does not reflect the views of Mel Barrett or Ruby Grace Productions. Listener discretion is advised. Indiantown Gap Road. Whoa, okay. There's a lot of cornfields out here. Oh, this is beautiful. I feel like I'm just getting deeper into the country, though. So I'm like, where is there going to be a bar? And who goes to it? I guess all the locals within a couple mile radius. But these are, Veronica and Fahad both were, worked on the base, or at least were part of military culture. So it's strange because I feel like there would be more places for them to go around the base. And so if Fahad made a decision to go to Frogs Hollow, it's so secluded. Maybe he chose that place because he didn't want anybody from the base to see them together. Not really sure. Okay, I am 600 feet away and I am still driving between two farms. Oh, here we are. Okay, this is a brewery. All right, let's see. So I just want to give you an idea of where we are here. It's just rural. There's just grass and farms and military folks.
Fort Indiantown Gap is the busiest National Guard training center in the nation. It is the third time in the last 4 years the Lebanon County facility has been tops in the nation. During the fiscal year of 2023, which just ended September 30th, nearly 140,000 military personnel trained there. Fort Indiantown Gap has been in the top 3 busiest every year since 2013.
This is Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, or as the locals call it, the Gap. When I say it's rural, I mean the greenest grass I've ever seen and acres upon acres of cornfields, split by one-lane roads, where you might get stuck behind a horse-drawn carriage driven by someone from the local Amish population. It's beautiful country, but it's also very dark. I wasn't prepared for the seedy underbelly I was about to uncover on my first innocent trip into the Gap, but I found it anyway. I'm Mel Barrett, and this is The In-Between. I remember 22. At least parts of it. It was nearing Y2K, and I fancied myself a bohemian poet in the vein of Ani DeFranco. I'd gotten a gig writing for a small indie lesbian magazine as their film reviewer, and with that gig came free room and board in my editor's studio apartment in Washington Square Park. All of my cab fare was taken care of, and the movies I'd review at the Angelica in the East Village, they were paid for too. I just had to write about them and show up. On the weekends, I'd listen and perform my poetry at the Nuyorican Poets Cafe, and I'd walk the city at 3 a.m. because it was so quiet. I had a day job, too, working for a Manhattan fruitier, taking phone orders from folks like Rosie O'Donnell when she wanted to send an elaborate fruit and chocolate basket to her friends at the studio. I made $12 an hour, which paid for my cover at the famous lesbian bar Meow Mix, and took care of my habits, my drinks, my smokes, my moleskins. I bought used books and lattes, had no savings, no car, just a kick-ass leather jacket I'd picked up at a Dallas thrift store before I got my Yankee ass out of there. I wore that thing even when the sun felt like it was melting it off my body. I was living the dream. Back then, we had time to figure out who we were and what we wanted to become, if anything. Veronika Rodriguez did not have that leisure. Born to a teen mom, Veronica's life started off turbulent, to say the least. Veronica's biological mother was raised in a strict Catholic home, and they didn't approve of their daughter getting pregnant. Shortly after Veronica was born, her mother's best friend mentioned to Bob and Diane Kolb that Veronica was in need of a more stable home. The Kolbs immediately took baby Veronica in, and she became their third child, after their biological children, Christina and Robert. Veronica is still in contact with her birth mother and siblings, but from what I've seen in my interactions with her, she's exactly where she belongs, with the only family she's really ever known. The Kolbs officially adopted her when she was 18, just 4 years before she was assaulted, on January 7th, 2023. I want to pause to make a correction here that is, in my opinion, supremely important to this story. Last week, I'd only had Veronica's case for about a week and wasn't as familiar with it as I'm becoming. I mistakenly reported that Veronica was 26 at the time of her assault, because that's what most of the local press had reported. Veronika told me she was, in fact, 22 years old. I want to take a detour here for a moment and make an observation. Why is it that our system and media try to age women up when they're alleged to have perpetrated a crime? Folks did it back in the day with Pamela Smart, whom I'll remind you was 22 when her husband Greg was murdered, though most people thought she was in her 30s. Do we do this because it seems unfathomable that an early 20-something woman could commit a crime? Is it easier for us to imagine them older, wiser, more responsible, that makes it easier to convict and incarcerate? Just a weird observation that keeps popping up for me, but at the end of the day, I made a mistake and I want to correct it. Veronika was 22 when she was allegedly raped in Fahad Pervez's Jeep. Her age is significant here because when she was adopted into the Kolb family, she was also adopted into the Mennonite religion. If you're unfamiliar with who the Mennonites are, here's a Cliff Notes explanation from the Ready to Harvest YouTube channel.
Anabaptists in Europe in the 1500s were in many groups and with various views, but when former Catholic priest Menno Simons became an Anabaptist, he quickly became highly influential, and eventually followers of his set of theology became known as Mennonites. Today, nearly half a millennium later, there are dozens of Mennonite denominations, including conservative Mennonites and more mainline or liberal Mennonites. For ordinances, baptism is only for believers, and those baptized as infants will be required to take adult baptism upon joining. Pouring is the common mode. The Lord's Supper is also practiced and viewed as symbolic. Many churches also practice foot washing. Mennonites are often confessional. The mainline Mennonite Church USA has the Confession of Faith in a Mennonite perspective. The 1632 Dordrecht Confession of Faith is often used as articles of faith for conservative Mennonites still today. On salvation, Mennonites do teach that a person once saved can fall from grace and be lost. Eschatology views can differ. Historically, Mennonites were not premillennial, but some groups in the 1800s through 1900s became influenced by the view. Churches are most often congregational in polity, but some denominations have had bishops and a more hierarchical structure. Mennonites teach nonviolence and non-resistance, and so will not fight in war, including defensively. Another traditional belief was not swearing oaths. Conservative Mennonites often have plain dress, avoidance of jewelry, and head coverings for women, but those in mainline denominations don't. Most conservative Mennonites do not have women pastors, but many do have deaconesses as a role women can have in the church. Mainline Mennonites do allow women in a ministerial role. Conservative and moderate Mennonites don't allow gay marriage, and it's controversial in mainline Mennonite denominations. Worship style in conservative groups is often a cappella and simple, whereas the mainline churches may have any style from traditional to contemporary. Mennonites are one of the classic Anabaptist denominations.
I asked Veronika to tell me about her religion, and this is how she explained it. A reminder, Veronika can't speak on record yet because of her pending sentence, so for now, I'll try to be her voice. Quote, they were more moderate Mennonite, especially when I came around, because they still wanted to instill religion, but also be respectful to my other biological family. So instead of the whole skirt and t-shirts, I just had a very modest dress code. So like no short shorts, no bras showing, no tube tops, no crop tops, no low-cut shirts. Mom used to wear a bonnet, but her hair thinned, so she stopped. But my dad's parents, my Grammy and my pop-pop, they were very, very Mennonite, like bonnet dresses and the whole shebang. Beliefs/mindsets are very traditional and conservative. Man is breadwinner, woman is homemaker. Mom canned, gardened, community service. Our family went to a Mennonite church for 30 years, very traditional in teachings. We did the whole feet washing thing. Cars have always not been flashy or anything like fancy. I didn't wear a bikini until I moved out of the house, and I couldn't date in high school. Technology was selective, but it couldn't be fully taken away because Dad worked in computers. He was kind of like an engineer, so he needed an office and Wi-Fi, etc. But I definitely was restricted on what I listened to or watched. I think my biggest memory, for example, is one day someone was talking about rappers, and I thought they meant rappers with a W. And another teen my age said, oh, I love Eminem. And I was like, oh, I love M&Ms. And then people were like, huh? And I was like, huh? And then the one adult was like, Veronika doesn't know the singer. We've moved to an evangelical Christian church now, but if my family is asked, they will say they are Mennonite. Veronika was homeschooled, was a member of 4-H where she raised bunnies. At the age of 21, she had her first drink. But her friends tell me she only ever had wine and beer and was a total lightweight. Here's one of her friends talking about her experience drinking with Veronika.
She doesn't get to that point very often. She'll get to the point of like, oh, like I'm talkative, I'm having a good time. But yeah, it would be pretty fast if she was drinking Long Island iced teas, especially from what I hear, like she hadn't really had any experience with Long Island iced teas, and those are like
Potent.
Those are something that's going to get you drunk pretty fast.
Yeah, totally potent.
Like,
She said she had never even heard of it before, and I'm like, and she was probably thinking it was just like an iced tea with like a dollop of something in it, but it's actually all just,
And she told you she grew up in a Mennonite family. Like it's like even stuff that we would discuss with her, like she would just be completely clueless and like innocent to so many things. And of course she's had like relationships in the past, but she definitely like is missing out on a lot of exposure that a lot of us got at a young age.
Yeah, I wonder, so you knew her right around the time she was like 22. She told me she started drinking when she was 21. I imagine because of her background that you did experience a lot of, her innocence. And I wonder, did she ever seem like she was just trying to like sow her wild oats, like trying to be a little bit wild, or was she just had a good head on her shoulders and was trying to like build her life? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I definitely believe like she has a good head on her shoulders and she's like trying to, build off, because like she's adopted, she has a lot of struggles, and being a Hispanic woman, like she has a lot of struggles that she has to go through. So I've never seen her wild out, even if if anything, she's like the responsible one of the group that like reins us all back a little bit. So even like you would expect someone like that to go crazy, but no.
How ridiculous is it that I feel the need to tell you about her history with drinking so you'll understand her tolerance level on the night she was assaulted? But here we are. Drinking is a rite of passage for most early 20-somethings, but when someone is a victim of assault, their history becomes something to dissect and interrogate. Well, I'm here to dispel the record. Veronica Rodriguez didn't drink a lot and didn't hold her liquor well. Now imagine a few Long Island iced teas in the body of a 5'0" 22-year-old who isn't an experienced drinker, and I think you can understand how inebriated she was the night she was assaulted. Does being drunk make it her fault? According to the National District Attorneys Association, quote, the primary challenge in prosecuting rape cases where the victim is voluntarily intoxicated is that society tends to have difficulty distinguishing between drunken sex and rape. Instead of assuming that it was probably rape because the woman was too drunk to consent, people tend to assume that the woman consented because she was intoxicated and simply regretted the sexual encounter later, end quote. Maybe someone should send Pierre Hesse-Graf, the prosecutor in this case, as well as the investigators, a copy of the NDAA's report on prosecuting alcohol-facilitated sexual assault. They don't seem to have read it before prosecuting and convicting a rape victim. The NDAA's report goes on to say,
the more predatory the defendant's behavior, the easier it is to prove that he is a rapist. Factors to consider include the following. Did the defendant use force or threaten the victim? Using force or threats of force to accomplish intercourse is not consistent with consensual sex. Jars, did the victim say no? If so, why did the defendant disregard her no? Why was the victim's no not good enough for the defendant? Ignoring a sexual partner when she says no is not consistent with consensual sex. Look at the defendant's level of intoxication. What was his capacity to do other things? Could he walk, talk, play pool, drive a car? Was his speech slurred? The more sober he was, the easier it is to show he was a predator, especially if the victim was extremely intoxicated. Was there any planning or manipulation on the part of the defendant? Were there any attempts to deceive the victim? Did the defendant do anything to control the situation and overcome the victim's will? Did he isolate her? Did he lie to her? Is there any evidence of grooming? Did the defendant do anything during the time prior to the rape to gain the victim's trust? Did he do anything to make it easier to rape her? Is there any evidence that he set her up? For example, did he talk about making a special punch to get his target drunk? Did he buy her drinks and encourage her to drink them in an attempt to get her drunk? Did the defendant prey upon the victim's vulnerabilities? Did he do anything to wear down the victim's resistance? Is there any evidence that the defendant selected the victim because he knew that she would be an easy target? Has the defendant done it before? Have anyone else ever accused him of rape or other misconduct? Has anyone ever seen women leaving his room, apartment, home crying or distraught? Did the defendant know the victim? If so, did he use his knowledge or familiarity with the victim to gain access to her or to isolate her? Did he use his knowledge to attempt to silence her?
Let's take a quick break before we get into where Veronica was in her life before Fahad Perez allegedly raped her and Pierre Hesse-Graf prosecuted her.
The reason it's called Fort Indiantown Gap because during French and Indian Wars, when the Susquehannock Indians, Native Americans, joined up with the French, there's a gap where Indiantown run, creek comes through, and that was one of the pathways like Swatara Gap and Mennonite Gap that they had to make a fort. So thus, this whole area was known as Indiantown.
The biggest thing happening in Indiantown Gap is the military base, Fort Indiantown Gap. Fort Indiantown Gap is a training center for the Pennsylvania National Guard and other branches of the military, like the Army and the Air Force. It also trains law enforcement agencies and other local, state, and federal agencies. The center offers full spectrum and combat training opportunities for all types of units. Veronika was enlisted in the Air National Guard as an Airman First Class, or an A1C, though she hadn't gone through basic training yet as she had some medical issues holding her back, but she was working toward it. At 22, I was happy to sleep on a couch in someone's studio, all of my belongings stacked in a corner in milk crates. Veronika Rodriguez is not like me. At 22, she had 2 jobs, one on base, one off. She was working on becoming a nurse. She had her own apartment, a savings account, and an education. 2 days before Veronika was allegedly raped by Fahad, they'd met when he came into the dental office where she worked on base. He was in town for drilling, he said. He was new to the area and new to the military, he said. They talked about books. Veronika is super friendly and outgoing. I get the feeling she makes friends wherever she goes. She also has a nurturing quality that I'm sure bolsters her abilities as a nurse and a hairstylist, which is her civilian gig. Fahad asked for her number right then, but she declined, and she said she'd be happy to take his. He asked her out before he left, and she played wishy-washy. When she decided to text him, it was about the book conversation they'd had. He asked her out. When she finally agreed to go to dinner as friends, she chose Snitz Creek, a place she knew well because she played bingo and other games there with her friends from church.
Hey, how are you? Can I sit at the bar?
I spent some time at Snitz Creek last week when I traveled to the Gap to interview some folks and get a feel for the area. I spoke at length with a lovely bartender who's worked there for 19 years. She'd never heard of Veronika's case, but was shocked when I told her about it.
She had her phone on.
Yeah.
And she was found
They turned it on her.
how does that even happen?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
When Veronika and Fahad met in the parking lot of Snitz, they found the restaurant closed for a staff celebration. Veronika was already getting nervous about this guy. She didn't have a great feeling about it and thought the restaurant being closed was a pretty good indication that they should just call it off or rain check. She suggested they reschedule and started to walk toward her car, but Fahad got persistent. He knew of another place just down the road, he said, which is odd because he was supposed to be new to the area. And for the record, down the road in the Gap is usually a 15 to 20-minute drive. In fact, the other place Fahad wanted to go to, Frog's Hollow, was about 7 miles away through farmland. At this point, he was also insisting that he drive them to save on gas. Veronika's intuition was spiking, but she didn't want to be rude, so she went with him. In the car, his questions changed from professional and friendly, questions about her new military career and books, to are you single and what are you interested in? Next, he wanted her to call Frog's Hollow to make sure they were open. Veronika called, but she purposefully dialed a number 1 digit off from Frog's Hollow in the hopes that no one would answer, and she could tell him they seemed closed, which is exactly what she did when no one picked up the wrong number. He drove on anyway, and they pulled into the empty parking lot of Frog's Hollow Tavern.
Oh, I guess we're here. Oh, weird. Yeah, lots of bikes out front. $0.85 wings and free pool on Sundays. Wow. What a strange place to go on a date. That is so strange. There's not much to explore here at the tavern, Frog's Hollow. Definitely looks kind of like not really a biker bar, but I mean, there's a bunch of bikes out front. I would assume people stop because it's a beautiful day and they're out riding their bikes. But it's such a strange place to go on a date. It's like out in the middle of nowhere. There's like woods across the street with a trailer tucked away. It's got a gorgeous view. I mean, it's up on a hill and you can see the mountains and cornfields, but it's just out in the middle of nowhere. What a strange place to go.
In my opinion, the place is shady as fuck. So shady, I didn't even want to go inside at 12 p.m. on a Friday by myself. But this is the location the guy who is new in town and new to the military chose as soon as he found out Snitz was closed. When Fahad checked the door and found it open, he insisted they go in and have dinner and drinks. Once inside, Veronica realized they were completely alone, save for one server and a cook in the back. When Fahad asked what she wanted to drink, she said she didn't drink a lot or go to bars very often, so he ordered her a Long Island iced tea. When she asked what it was, he said it was just iced tea and a bit of alcohol. A bit. Yeah. Here's Steve, the bartender on YouTube, making a Long Island iced tea.
So welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make the very dangerous Long Island iced tea. You've got rum, vodka, gin, tequila, and Cointreau. So it's a really simple drink. It's just a built cocktail. So just put some ice into your glass. A lot of recipes out there call for 3/4 or full shot. Obviously, if you put a full shot of everything, you're going to have 5 shots in one glass. Whereas if you only do half shot, 2.5 shots per drink, which is a little bit more reasonable. So top that up with ice, and then almost to the top with Coke. So remember, it is an iced tea, so it's going to look like tea. You don't want to put too much Coke into that. So you should still be able to see through it. And then to the top, 3/4 of a shot of lemon juice, and there you have a Long Island iced tea. Cheers. So the citrus helps actually mask a lot of the spirits in here. You can't tell how strong the drink is, but the Coke does mask a lot of the flavour, so you can't really distinguish the different spirits that are in there. And I think the one main reason you're going to be drinking this is to pretty much get messed up. So Long Island iced tea.
Veronica avoided drinking as much as possible, but Fahad kept pushing the glass toward her, urging her to keep up with him. He ordered them food and several more drinks for Veronica. She started to feel woozy, more than drunk. She had a headache, her motor skills weren't functioning properly, she was sick to her stomach, and her vision was off. Finally, she asked for water. Fahad said no. When the server came by, she ordered it for herself and then promptly went to the bathroom. She fell off the toilet when she tried to sit down. She thought of who she could call, but there was no one. She had no cell service out in the country. Back at the table, Fahad was becoming more aggressive in his questions and actions. Questions like, who's in your life? Who's your support system? Why do you let religion dictate decisions? Why do you believe in God? Veronica started recording because she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and now she was 7 miles away from her car and drunk. He started getting irritated that she was ignoring him and staring at her phone. He said how all girls her age are just glued to their phones and don't know how to connect with people. This is where I should tell you, Fahad was in his early 40s, though he'd told Veronica he was 30-ish. At a certain point, he ripped her cell phone out of her hands and tried to go through it. He pushed Veronica away when she tried to take her phone back. He was going through her apps and her texts. Finally, she grabbed it back and locked it. Shortly thereafter, he grabbed her phone again and tried to use her face to unlock it. She closed her eyes and turned away. His frustration with Veronica was increasing. He asked her who she was talking to, who knew they were together, who had their location. Why was she ignoring him? He said she was being bitchy and that all girls her age are so sensitive. Finally, Fahad was ready to go. Veronica was hopeful they were going back to her car, though at this point she knew she couldn't drive and didn't want a chance of DUI. Fahad had to help her walk to the car. Once they were driving again, she noticed his on-screen GPS, and it had her full home address locked in. She hadn't given him this information. How had he gotten it? Did he have full access to her files on base? Veronica asked him about the address in his GPS, but he quickly changed the screen in his car. Just before getting into the car, Fahad had taken her glasses off, telling her she was much more beautiful without them. She couldn't see. She didn't know where the glasses were. He told her he had them and they were in a safe place, but he wasn't giving them back to her right now. Finally, they were back at Snitz Creek, parked next to her car. She started to get out, but he locked the doors, threatening her, saying he could report her for DUI. He then took her keys. Fahad started asking to see her tattoos. She said she could show him on Instagram, but he said pictures don't count and asked her to take off her pants. Then he started talking about how hard dating is and how frustrating women are. He talked shit about his ex-wife, who, unbeknownst to Veronica at the time, was not in fact his ex. They were merely separated. And after all this, Fahad felt he was ready to really make a move. So he started rubbing her shoulders and chest. She told him to stop. He tried to kiss her. She pushed him off. She screamed, "Don't." He tried again, and she made a gurgling throat sound. He tried again, and she said she was sick and didn't want to get him sick. He went in again, and this time landed. He kissed her so hard, her nose started to bleed. I've been in this parking lot. It's tiny but active. It might be the only gas station for 5 miles. It's situated on a 1-lane road between 2 farms and a tiny little hut across the street that's a barbershop, and that's about it. How did no one help her? Fahad stopped when her nose started to bleed. Funk's gas station is connected to Snitz Creek, so Veronica insisted on going into the gas station to get something for her nose and to use the bathroom. But she couldn't buy anything herself because at this point, Fahad had her wallet and her phone, which was still recording. Veronica went into the bathroom and drank water straight from the faucet, willing herself to sober up. She even prayed to her God that she wouldn't die that night. When she opened the door, he was standing there, waiting. She wanted to tell the clerk what was happening, but she couldn't escape him. He was everywhere. He bought her some nose spray and tissues, and when she asked to be taken home, he said no. She started to realize she was in trouble. She was going to have to talk or fake her way out of this. He put her back in the car and started to drive. She couldn't see anything without her glasses, just the dark, desolate night in front of them. She couldn't recognize where she was or where they were going until finally he drove them down a dark road in the woods and parked. Later, Veronica would find out they were parked behind the Keystone Conference Center, where he had had a training that week. The conference center is located off of Moonshine Road and isn't far from Indiantown Gap National Cemetery. The conference center itself is tucked away and surrounded by thick woods. Once parked, Fahad asked her to come sit in his lap, and she said she couldn't climb over the console. He tried to kiss her again. She said something along the lines of, "Dude, you're trying to kiss me, don't." Then he put his hands in her pants, and she pulled his hand away. He tried again, and again she pulled his hand away. On the third attempt, he said he was doing a medical exam on account of him being a doctor. She said, "No, it's not," and removed his hand again. He got irritated, got out of the Jeep and slammed the door. He went to the back seat and started moving things around back there, including his children's car seats. Then he sat there. He asked her to join him. She said no. She couldn't get over the console. He kept asking until finally she gave in. She knew she was upsetting him further and he was irritated. She had no idea what he was capable of. At this point in time, a victim of sexual assault only has a few options. Fight, though you might get murdered, or appease just to get out of it. I'll remind you, Veronica was approximately 3 miles from her car in a remote wooded area. She was drunk and without her glasses, her phone, or her wallet. She chose to appease. I probably would have done the same thing. She climbed into the back seat and they started kissing. She could feel his erection. She said something to the effect of, "Listen, I like you, but are you going to be offended if we don't have sex?" At this point, she told him she was celibate. He didn't believe her. He was trying to take her clothes off. He said he wouldn't be offended, but frustrated. He kissed her again, pulling at her clothes, and then he was on top of her, removing her clothes. Veronica was panicking. She was trying to think of anything that would get her out of this situation. She was asking for her things back. She suggested they go to her apartment. He could follow her in her car. She was trying desperately to get back to her car to figure out some way to lose him and find safety and someone safe. She tried to play on his vanity, saying, "This feels like high school and having sex in a car is ghetto." She brought up his marriage, his children, but he didn't hear her. He started kissing and biting her neck, working his way down her chest. Then he sat up, pulled her on top of him, and continued to take her clothes off. She was being manhandled and unable to fight back. He accidentally hit her head on the car's interior and she said, "Ow," but this didn't deter him. Then she heard him remove his belt. She started to scramble to get away. She screamed no twice, but she was pinned between Fahad and the front passenger seat. She pushed hard against his chest and she hit her head again, this time on the window. He dug his fingers and nails into her hips to hold her down. So then she goes back to other tactics. What about a hotel? What about my place? What about just going home and forgetting all this? Then Fahad did the unthinkable. He inserted himself inside of her and she froze. Veronica stared out the window into the woods, trying to find someplace else to go in her head. Finally, she told him she wasn't on birth control. Maybe this would stop him. It didn't. Instead, he laughed and said he could prescribe her something. When it was over, she moved away from him, sitting behind the driver's seat, staring into the darkness, silent. He asked her what her favorite movie was. She barely heard him. Then, in the darkness, blue and red lights lit up Fahad's Jeep. Help had arrived. Or had it. More after a short break.
My mind is kinda jaded. That drink, you know I'm faded. Just feeling so underrated. This world so heavy weighing. But you know that I push back though. That drink, you know I'm faded. Just feeling so underrated. This world so heavy weighing. But you know that I push back though.
There's a scramble to put on clothes. Veronica can't find her underwear. Fahad turned to her and said, "Stay here, I'll handle this." And then he reaches into the front seat glove box and pulls out a police officer's badge. Stunned, Veronika sat back and watched him approach the cops. He flashed his badge, then spent 10 minutes or so talking his way out of trouble. Fahad came back and told her to get in the front seat. She looked suspicious. He took her ID and gave it to the cops. They issued a trespassing ticket and they left. And when they left, so did Veronika's opportunity to tell them what had just happened to her. When Fahad returned, he drove her back to her car. While driving, he asked her to not block him or ghost him, because he hates it when girls her age do that. When she got home, she showered. She was in shock. Fahad texted her. She replied because, well, this guy, this doctor, this cop, he knows where she lives. He invited himself over the next night, and she reluctantly agreed. Then she sent him a text of her chest, not her breasts, just above her shirt line, where there are numerous bruises and scratches. She texts, "It looks like I was beat up." Then she texted her best friend Tony and said, "A guy had sex with me in the woods. I was blackout. LOL. The cops showed up." Tony, who has known Veronika for years, was like, "Yeah, no, sis. This doesn't sound like you. It doesn't sound right. Was this consensual?" Veronika downplayed it. Denial had taken its hold. Tony was active duty Army at the time and a mandated reporter. Tony asked if she wanted to report. Veronika said she didn't know, because no one ever believes girls in the military, or they end up dead. Veronika's not wrong. According to the Military Times, there were more than 75,500 cases of sexual assault in the military in 2021, rather than the Pentagon's estimate of approximately 35,900 cases that year, according to the report by the Cost of War Project at Brown University's Watson Institute. Researchers also estimated more than 73,600 cases occurred in 2023, a significantly higher number than the DoD's estimate of 29,000 that year. On average, during the war in Afghanistan, 24% of active duty women and 1.9% of active duty men experienced sexual assault, the report stated, adding that racial minorities and LGBTQ+ service members also face greater risk of sexual assault. Just 3 years before Veronika was assaulted, 20-year-old soldier Vanessa Guillen was raped and killed. The I Am Vanessa Guillen Act is a U.S. law that addresses military sexual violence, particularly sexual harassment and assault, by reforming the Department of Defense's handling of such cases. It was named in honor of Vanessa Guillen, a soldier who was murdered after reporting sexual harassment. The act aims to remove prosecution decisions from the military's chain of command, create an independent process for investigating and prosecuting sex-related offenses, and establishes sexual harassment as a criminal offense within the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And in Veronika's case, she didn't have to make the choice to report. The military came to her. Her sergeant received notification that she had been issued a trespassing ticket. He asked her to give a statement about the trespassing. He wanted to know who she was with. She told him it was a new guy, an airman, but her sergeant was confused. Fahad Pervez wasn't an airman. He was a major in the Air National Guard, and they were both in trouble now. Next time on The In-Between, 2 investigations, 2 very different outcomes.
They're not going to be brave enough to leave the area. That's why these guys always have this sort of outsized power, because they're big fish in a small pond.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
The issue, I think, with this case is, doing the research that I'm working on right now, I don't think it's just Mechanicsburg. It goes all the way up to the state attorney general. There's a lot happening with the DA's office here. There's a lot happening with the cops. There are state senators. There's a consulting firm.
It means so much to me to hear those words. And at the same time, I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty that 13-year-old girl was raped.
Besides Veronika Rodriguez, going back to the DA's office, there's been some unsolved murders here in Lebanon County.
Yeah.
And I relate that to incompetence and lazy.
Well, these two, who I call Detective Itchy and Scratchy, they don't pick up on that, right? That how it got reported.
Yeah.
So they immediately just think that this is a cover.
This is definitely hearsay. I have to say that for the record.
Yeah, but it's also like she hasn't sued me for slander.
No,
and I've
exactly.
done nothing but go off about this to every person that would listen, every cop, anybody I could find. I told about this affair. She hasn't come after me for slander because she knows it's true.
Yeah, you got a point. I mean, but the next question I have, and this is where I haven't been able to find anything concrete, but I have been hearing rumors that there is some sort of a sex trafficking ring happening in Lebanon County.
Yes.
And that Veronica's case may have crossed over into that.
The In Between podcast is written, edited, and hosted by me, Mel Barrett, and is a production of Ruby Grace Productions. If you want ad-free exclusive content, bonuses, and lives, head on over to the In Between podcast Patreon and sign up. The researcher level starts at $6, and there's already 20-plus ad-free episodes for you to binge right now. Special thanks to Amber Hunt for editorial guidance, as well as the rest of the team at Grab Bag Collab, Amanda Rossman, and Daisy Egan for their support and guidance. Another special thanks to Rebecca Lavoie for her friendship and mentorship. You can catch me and Rebecca recapping the Karen Reed trial on the Crime Writers on The Readathon. Follow the In Between podcast on Blue Sky, Facebook, and YouTube at In Between Pod, and on Instagram at the In Between Pod Official. On TikTok, you can follow me at Jack of All Trades DC. Thanks for listening.